Hello, I'm Kat Sarfas, forever bookseller at Barnes & Noble. Today we are joined by the lovely Lynn Tan. Lynn is the author of the highly acclaimed and best-selling Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior, the eagerly awaited sequel and stunning conclusion of the Celestial Kingdom duology. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure and such an honor to be here.
Oh, wonderful. So it is early where I am. I am enjoying some coffee, but I know you're in Hong Kong. It is quite late. So I had read somewhere that you had a little bit of a bubble tea obsession.
Oh, I think it's in my bio on every book.
Yes.
I should have thought about that better.
Well, it's out there now. So I was just going to ask you how you were enjoying your evening.
Well, sadly, no bubble tea because, it'll keep me up for half the night. But I save bubble tea for the special occasions, like really hard deadline. No idea what to do.
Is that like your treat?
Then out hunting. Yes, very much. I don't want to know what goes into the bubble tea. I just want to drink it.
Whatever it is, it's the magical elixir. Yeah. It's that's what it is.
Just normal chamomile tea right now,
Okay. Well, I'm not surprised. Daughter of the Moon Goddess became quite a darling on the sort of book talk, bookstagram, whatever your platform. A sweeping adventure of immortals and magic. There's lush world building, a strong female protagonist, vivid characters. It's a tale of love and sacrifice and honor. It's the epitome of a must-read fantasy epic. There's a lot of fire and passion fandom out there. So I just want to know what that experience has been like for you, particularly around because so for Daughter of the Moon Goddess, that was your debut.
Yes, the book means a lot to me. It's writing it was very emotional and everything. It's based on a legend that I've always loved and one that is really important to me as well. But what was interesting was during my debut was January, and where I was, the COVID situation was not so good. So couldn't travel anywhere. Most things were shut, and it was very quiet. You couldn't congregate even, right? But social media can be challenging in some ways.
Yes.
But it was really wonderful in the sense that because of it, I actually felt very more connected to the release. Mm-hmm. I mean, like to the booksellers and the bookstores, librarians, when they had the new releases, then I saw the book there, and to the readers who bought it, read it, and shared about it. I mean, all this really made it come alive for me. It made me really realize that the book was actually out there, even though it was a while before I actually saw it on the shelves. And it really made it feel real, and I'm so grateful to everyone who reached out, and it really meant so much to me. Writing, I mean, it's been very like a personal emotional journey, and it's very hard to describe how it feels seeing the world and the words and the characters out in the hands of readers. Currently there are a few translate editions coming out right now, so it feels like debut again in a way.
Wow.
in different languages, so that's very exciting. I don't think any book resonates with everyone, but I'll say that I never imagined that it connected with some readers the way it did. And her journey, what she went through. Some of the readers were saying that they felt they knew her, and they felt she was like a friend. It's been so heartwarming to read, the messages that I've got. I try to read every one when I can, and unfortunately I do miss some because partly due to time difference as well. But
Mm-hmm.
All of them really do mean so much to me, right? I'm more on Instagram and not on TikTok yet.
But, that's okay.
but I've been sent some really amazing content and videos, and it seriously just blew my mind, and I'm so grateful for that as well. And there's been a lot of art. I love art personally. I do have art that I commissioned myself, but there's been a lot of reader art as well, which has been absolutely amazing, and I've loved seeing all of it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. The fan art, like people, I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, fan art.
Yes. So,
I love that. Again, it just gets to the heart. It's just a beautiful story, and so many people connected with it. And I think when you connect with a story like this, you just want to live in that world. Just immerse yourself in that experience. So that's so wonderful. I know you should not judge a book by its cover. However, I think we need to make an exception for these. Now, I have These are actually the advanced reader copies that I am like holding dear. I don't keep many advanced reader copies. Sometimes, I read them and pass them on, but these they're just so stunning. Both the US and the UK covers are gorgeous, as you do in your background.
Yes.
Can you so then, being sort of a lover of art, can you describe what it was like when you saw them? I mean, they're so intricate, and then obviously when you read the story, everything sort of comes alive. What was your reaction when you were opening these books, seeing these covers, seeing this whole project come to life?
I had an unboxing video, and I think I cried during it. It was not pretty. I seriously was not intending to cry, and then I cried, and then I walked away. And then my husband said, "No, you can't just leave it like that."
So you're like, I can't talk anymore. We're just gonna cry, and then we're gonna end the video.
I mean, it was my first arc and my first time seeing the cover. I mean, I'm horribly biased. I love all the covers. When I see them, my heart just swells. For the US covers, the artist is Kuri Huang, and she is amazing. I adore her work. He has this ability to capture these traditional elements in such a unique and fantastical flair. And to me, at least, I feel that they're distinctly, Chinese with a very modern and different and like a fantasy touch, right? And I just love them. And I'll say every publisher has a different process, and I feel very fortunate that I did manage to see the artwork in some stages of development. And even in the very draft form, I did feel it really captured the heart and spirit of the story. I felt that it was very, evocative, romantic, and also nostalgic in a way, right? And all the elements, I mean, there's so many elements there that, as you said, that connected to the story when you read about it. The moon was inspired by the title, The Girl Was Staring at the Moon. And the moon was gold, and there's clouds and peonies because for the immortal realm. The stars in the sky, and this is something that goes across both of them, are for the meaning in her name. And what I really liked was her courage, and her strength was reflected in how she carries herself. Very, with a straight back and everything. That was what the artist conveyed to me, and I thought that was very lovely. And Heart of the Sun Warrior, it's very different. It's so fierce in a way, but to me, it's like a perfect accompaniment to the Moon Goddess. And the sun and the moon theme, I guess if you read the stories, I guess it will come alive as to the reason of that. I think it is definitely a lot fiercer. I mean, Xingyan has her bow drawn.
Yep.
She is ready for whatever comes. And I guess it will become apparent what she's aiming at. But I think it really reflects also where she's come. She's become, this brave warrior, and she's not afraid to make hard decisions or to face whatever comes her way. So, yeah.
I love it. Yeah. These are books that, it's almost a shame to spine them, to put them in your bookshelf. You don't want to, they need to be faced out. I love it. And I love when a cover just so perfectly complements the contents within. And I just thought these just, stunning. So as we were, talking about the covers and talking a little bit about the story, so this series is inspired by the legend of Chang'e, the moon goddess in Chinese mythology. There are many variations of this tale, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole because I had heard that there were, I had heard that there were variations. And after reading, your retelling, what do you love about the Chang'e's legend, and what was that spark that started this journey for you?
It's a story that means a lot to me. It is often retold during the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is a really important festival for us.
Yes.
And interestingly, the date always changes. It's on the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, so it changes every year. But it's always on the night of when the moon is supposedly at its brightest. And so it's my favorite festival growing up. I mean, I have so many wonderful memories of that time because it's a festival where it's really about close family or close friends. People who you're close to, right? And I have memories about eating mooncakes and carrying lanterns in the dark and, sharing the story as well. It's really a festival of love and reunion and family, all of which are key themes in the story. And I always thought about it, and they were partly because the elements were just so fascinating. You have the brave archer with the 10 flaming suns in the sky that he was tasked to shoot down because they were destroying the world. And you have his beloved wife. And you also have the story where he shoots them down and his wife takes the elixir and flies to the sky. And I found the ending very heartbreaking. So,
It
it was
is.
very tragic. I mean, it was a terrible. I mean, it was a betrayal, and she saw it as a betrayal. And as you said, we will go into there were many reasons or variations as to why she did it, right? But I think that ending actually left me feeling unsettled. And I always wondered that if there was more to the story. Interestingly, the first line of Dora the Moon Goddess is the first thing that came to me, and it's probably the one thing, well, two things that I can remember that has not changed. And it's there. There are many legends about my mother because, as you said, there was a variation where she took the elixir of immortality because she was trying to save it from a thief. And there is one that said her husband Hou Yi became a tyrannical king, and she took it so his people wouldn't suffer under his reign.
Yes.
Or it could just be, she wanted to become a goddess. I mean, it's very understandable.
Yes, it was like, and then it makes you, and then you start thinking like, oh, this is how this is definitely what happened. But it's who knows? Like, it was just wild.
I know. And so I was just thinking that, it would have been a very, very difficult decision. I mean, I think they were in love, deeply in love, both of them, right? Even after she went to the moon, it was said that she lived in a life of solitude, missing her husband. And so for myself, when I heard all these different variations, and then I wondered, like, what if there was more? So the title came along with the first line, and I just imagined that what if there was a daughter, and that was who she was protecting when she took the elixir, not both herself and the daughter as well, right? And so I started thinking about, it would be such a fascinating heritage in a way for a child born of Chang'e and Hou Yi, and how she would also have the traits of her father and be someone who would fight for her mother's freedom as well. So I guess that was what started it.
I love
in a very roundabout way.
Yes, and I mean, I want to get to characters a little bit later, but the mother-daughter relationship is just it's so beautiful, and because it is again that just a reason. And to me, when I read this and then had gone back and had read some again variations of the folklore, and then kind of came back here, I was like, no, this is a good one. I like this. That she did this for her daughter. So you tell the story in two parts. So we have or the daughter's journey, I should say, in two parts. Why a duology?
No spoilers. I mean, I always imagine the story as a duology. Dora the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior, both inspired by different elements of the core mythology. And I was very happy that during the first call with my editor, David Pomerito, we actually shared the same vision. I mean, book 2 was not written yet. It was just an idea in my head of, certain themes I wanted to, and certain continuation of the journey and how it developed. Dora the Moon Goddess can also be read as a standalone, and some resolution is reached, but I felt the story was unfinished there. There were some unresolved ends. I'm trying to be very vague here. Most of the realms to be explored, a lot of questions, because she had changed a lot in the story, and especially towards the events at the end. And she's no longer who she was then. And I believe that in Heart of the Sun Warrior, it rounds off who she has become, putting her to the ultimate test in a way, and not just her, but her companions as well, to face all that they've become. And it also goes deep into the mythology as well, which I love. So yeah.
Well, we are so grateful that you did not end it with one book. The story, but I love it. I mean, I know there are series that go on and trilogies, but there's something kind of lovely about a duology, and it kind of made me think also with the sun and the moon and the yin and the yang, like having the two, and it just felt very, very perfect and very complete. Speaking of mythology, so these retellings and reimaginings around sort of mythology folklore, they're really having a moment. I think we've always sort of looked at these folklores and looked at these stories, and to sort of shape obviously narratives. Like we talked about, there are so many variations within these stories, and then the modern takes that we're seeing now. And I have a lot of ideas around why we love to go back to these sort of origin stories in a way, but I'd love to get your take, and to ask, what are some of your favorite tales other than the Moon Goddess?
It's been very exciting seeing, all the different stories, the different retellings. I mean, I love Greek mythology. I also love seeing mythology from other cultures, Indian, Korean, Chinese. There have been quite a few in recent years. I think that partly the reason why. This might be because there is a thread of similarity to the stories. I think they mean something to us. They're part of our heritage, something that we grew up listening, and so they are, important to us in that way. We have that association with them, and they're rooted in our culture as well. And because of all that, I think they feel a little bit more real, even though they are fantastical and in magical realms, and they're not real. But somehow I think because they feel so familiar, they do feel a little bit more real. And there's also this timeless quality in a way as well. And I think this is also what helps it resonate or connect with a lot of people, right? Having said all that, I do think also there is a lot of room for imagination to grow in these stories, because there is a lot of space to take up with because the mythologies often don't have, a lot of mythologies don't really have very set dates, for example, or set events, right? It's a story that is passed down, that it's told verbally. And so, it changes over time as well. So there are a lot of different interpretations that could be taken to give the story a different, voice or perspective. Or sometimes, it could be used to focus on a lesser known character or in this case, one that is, made up.
So speaking of magical realms, I had read in your bio something that was very sweet, how you talked about sort of your inspiration for stories and how your dad had given you books, and that your favorite thing was to get lost in these sort of magical realms. So I have to ask, if you could be lost in any magical realm, what would it be and why?
They're all very dangerous.
I know. That is true. There are lots of things. There are lots of things to consider.
I always liked stories with a fairy tale element. I mean, when I was young, I would read all of them. Right, there's your Cinderella, your Sleeping Beauty, and all those. I love those stories where you could imagine forests, enchanted forests, and like wonderful castles and everything as well. And I also like the fact that beneath this layer, there was also something else. There was, sometimes a monster in the forest, or someone you thought is a monster that is not a monster. Or, in the palace or the castle, there could be like some danger, hidden danger as well. So I like stories with different layers. I like worlds with different elements as well. I do like underwater worlds as well. I find them really, really fascinating. Yes, because I mean, you can just imagine so many things about it, right? And you can just imagine, the different elements there, and something that we are not used to as well. And I just think it would be something very, very beautiful once we get over the mechanics of how we would breathe and everything there. So.
Mechanics aside, again, this is magical realms, yeah, fantastical.
Yeah.
No, that is, if you think about, I think that it's a place where your imagination can play. So I think maybe almost the less about it. So like you said, underwater, where there's, I mean, just in general, there's so much in the depths of the ocean that we have no idea. I mean, they're still discovering new species, all the time. It's crazy.
New species, new magic, new treasure or anything like that. And I think I'm also drawn to things that are set in nature. I do like to spend a lot of time outdoors and everything. So I do like mountains and forests, and just imagining how those could be interpreted in a different way from those that we see, right? So
wonderful. So okay, now we wrapped up the series for now. So looking back, what was your favorite part of this writing experience?
There are a couple of parts I really liked. I liked thinking about the world and bringing it to life in different ways. And I like to do that in a way that I felt that I was there, and describing it as in, from the perspective of being there, not being a character, but just imagining the world itself, right? I loved being able to bring in parts of, my culture, elements of Chinese fantasy that fascinated me in my youth. I mean, I used to watch all those fantasy shows when I was young, and there would be so much beauty in them. There would be the most wonderful music. They would have these long flowing robes. There'll be very good food.
A must.
And I mean, the scenery and landscapes were all like stunning as well, that you could imagine. There's like mountains and bridges and flowering forests and everything. And so I love being able to weave in those elements and bring in a different take on them as well, like to show a different layer to them as well. I also love writing, bringing the characters to life, imagining them, and what their journey would be like, and how they might grow from, the setbacks or challenges that they face, and how it would impact them. And, because I believe that every action or every would have repercussions. And I think that they would change it, especially from those that are, more traumatic or larger ones, right? So, and I really enjoyed thinking about how this would impact not just them, but, how their relationships with other people as well. Those are the elements that I really did enjoy.
Oh, wonderful. So speaking of characters, and
Yeah.
I know this is a loaded question because it's like, asking to pick a favorite child, but do you have, I'll phrase it differently. So I was going to say, did you have a favorite character to write? But if you can't, because you can't possibly choose, was there a character that you were most connected to?
Well, I do have a favorite character. It's the title of the book.
All right. I guess that's
I do. I mean, I do love all the characters, but I would say that I love writing Xingyin, and not just because she's very good with the bow and magic and all that stuff, but I think because she's very strong inside, and she goes through a lot in the story, right? She goes through a lot of challenges, and above all, I think she is resilient because she's not always right. She makes mistakes. Things don't go all swimmingly for her, right? But all the hurt and failure doesn't destroy her. Of course, she gets upset and everything, right? But I think that she's able to, internalize it in a way and grow from it. And that was something that I really loved about her. She's also someone who's very passionate, who feels very deeply, and she's been described as being full of heart, which I really do agree. And she's not perfect either. She's jealous, she's quick tempered. As I said, she does make wrong decisions sometimes, and she can be reckless. And I also like the fact that while she has a sense of honor, I think it's not really a strict code. She's not afraid to bend the rules to get basically to win or to do what she needs to get done. And above all, I would say that she has a lot of hope in her. And because of that, I think it really helps her to become a survivor as well.
I will say, that was something that did sort of resonate with me, that resilience, and that just also the interpretation of herself that so often, I think that, and something we can, maybe that's, another reason I think so many people connected to this book and the story, because so often it can be very easy to, especially when things are falling, all around you, but she's able to sort of understand that, but then know what she has to do in a way, and then that resilience that she's not going to let this tragedy in her, having to leave, sorry, spoilers, but it's the first book. We should all have read it. Leaving her mother and
might be in the description as well.
That's right. I can't not say what happens. But she picks herself up in a way that is, is inspiring. And it's not that she just has this, overwhelming self-confidence. She doesn't. To your point, she does have faults, and she, whether it be her quick temper, but that I actually personally loved. I loved the dialogue. I loved her whips. I felt myself laughing out loud many times. But she was kind of inspiring in that way, that I think she's self-aware, but at the same time knows that she needs to move forward, and has that sort of that clear vision in a way.
I think sometimes she doesn't know, though. I think, you know what I mean? In the beginning, I think, let's say if something bad happens, I think sometimes she just doesn't have the answer. And I think that's a lot of us sometimes. We just don't have the answer right away. What I like basically is that she is able to think things through, or try different ways and see whether it works or not. Or just, kind of sometimes you just muddle through it like a lot of us do as well. Except the stakes are a lot higher.
Yes. I mean, my fit might have been and again, this is should not be a spoiler because it happens early on. But when she's making the tea, and it just goes spectacularly wrong. Oh
no! I'll try to think worst tea possible.
I was going to ask if you had any personal experience, because I feel like I did. When I was reading that, oh yeah, I've had that, and just but it's just oh well, like you said, she just Like, all right, and like it's gonna happen. She's wonderful, and thank you for gifting her to us.
You're
So
very
the
kind.
so we talk about character of, so you've given us your favorite, but then I mean there are some just beautiful, again, with your world building, and also just how, your character development, and as much as these novels are beautiful to read in terms of, again, the atmosphere and creating that world, but they're also very character driven. And so with all of that, was there a scene that was particularly difficult to work through, or a scene that you really loved to write, something that came together, just sort of perfectly?
There are quite a few.
I
I
would love
probably
to.
won't
I know
name.
everyone would love to know.
I probably won't name any of the characters and just describe. So, I basically like in Dora the Moon Goddess, there's a scene that I really like. It's in a peach blossom forest, and basically like all the trees are flowering, and they don't have leaves, and basically like, it's just pink petals or peach petals everywhere. And it's like based on a place that I visited before, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. It's also very classic Chinese fantasy in a way. Sometimes you see this scene, and you'll see the falling flower petals. And what I really liked as well was to include like a hint of flirtation, and a little bit of sword fighting and archery as well, because why not? All of it together. But I felt that was a very fun scene to write, and also I guess I shouldn't say much more up here, but I was just thinking about the characters getting to know each other better in moments like these, moments that are not really about fighting the monster or anything, but quieter moments when they can speak and when they can just be. And there's also a scene later on. There's one with water lanterns, and I find that scene very very emotional and very meaningful on many levels. So as for Heart of the Sun Warrior, we're going to get even more vague now.
Okay. I think that's okay.
There's a starlit night that I love because it is, to me, very fairy tale like and very romantic. There is a certain reunion scene which had a lot of fun writing.
You heard it here first, Phil.
I mean, and well, in that reunion scene, there is a lot of emotion going on, and not all of it is happy. So, but that one was a fun one to write.
So you were talking about the legend and the folklore behind, that kind of inspired these books, and the Mid-Autumn Festival. Am I saying that? Yeah. So what is your favorite? So you're talking a little bit about, celebrating that festival. Can you tell us what your favorite part of the festival is? What your favorite part of the celebration is? What do you enjoy the most?
The things that I remember most, because it's it's a festival that hey, quite true, but we're not going to say that here.
It's okay. This is a safe space.
They make very good mooncakes these days. There are many flavors. But it's a festival that I celebrated since my childhood. And I think that's something that really stayed with me, is that we celebrated it with very close family. So not just all family, like certain festivals, but it was family that was very close to us. So, cousins that I knew really well would come. And aside from the wonderful food, of which there was a lot of, I really liked the time when we would actually light lanterns and at night, and we would just walk around holding the lanterns. And I think one actually was set on fire once. Someone had a traditional lantern. I mean, I think these days a lot of them are battery operated, but my cousin had a traditional lantern, and that was made out of like glass paper with a candle in it. And when it's a windy night, yeah, that can be quite dangerous. I remember that.
Now you remember. Now you think to yourself, "Oh, this is why we use battery operated."
I actually do like, the whole like. Well, I wasn't holding the flaming lantern, to be fair, but it did look very nice before everything happened.
These books now, we've gone over the mythology and that inspiration, and obviously it's lovely to write fantasy because you can change things and add these sort of wonderful elements and get lost in these worlds. And we have so enjoyed reading them. So I have to ask, what is next for you? Are you looking at another myth, another legend, another folklore, whatever you want to call it, to sort of reimagine? Is there something that you sort of have on your mind, or some other project that has been sort of tinkering around?
I am working on something right now. Bear in mind that all this is still very nebulous and subject to change. But I'm spending most of my time right now working on what is very creatively titled Untitled Book 3 on Goodreads. Yes, there will be a
Title.
title hopefully sometime soon in the future. So this one is set in the same world as the Celestial Kingdom duology, except it will span both the mortal and immortal realms. It will be featuring different main characters, and they will be quite different in situation and personality as well. We might have a couple of guest appearances if they make the final version. it's still
If they make
being
the
written.
cut, if they make the cut.
We'll see the word count. So, I mean, the way I'm thinking about it, there's a lot of action. In some ways, it might be more romantic. There'll be angst and tension, but also in other ways, it will be a little bit lighter than Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior. So that is book 3. There is also another project that I'm not meant to, but I guess I will share more about this later that I'm working on, and I actually spent the last couple of weeks on it. It was really fun. I don't think I can say much more on this one, so I'm just going to go to the next book. To be safe, the one that is called Untitled Book 4. I'm very sorry for all this, by the way. Actually, the funny thing is I do have a title for that one, but my editors and I need to chat before it goes any further. And that one is inspired by the Chinese legend of Lady White Snake. And it's I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's about an ancient snake spirit that takes mortal form after cultivating her powers for like many, many centuries. And she falls in love with a mortal. So who doesn't know she's a snake thinks that, she's just mortal. So that basically gives rise to a lot of complications. And there is also a lot of danger in the story as well. So I'm thinking of it's going to be set in a totally different world, and there'll be a lot of different elements as well compared to the original mythology. I'm very excited about it and slightly intimidated because this is a legend which is also much loved and one that I've also grown up hearing about. So I can't wait to share more about that one.
That is so exciting! Thank you for sharing Untitled Book 4.
It's very easy to remember, though, right?
Yeah, it's very easy to remember. So speaking of titles, because you're obviously saying that you're still kind of working those out. What comes first? Do you write? Are you someone who writes the story and then the title sort of comes from that, or does the title sort of spring forth and then everything kind of flows after?
Funny thing is, for Daughter of the Moon Goddess, it was like literally the first thing. That and the first line. I can't even remember which came first, but that just sprang into my mind. And I just went with that basically because it just felt so right. And then somehow, nope. After that, it's just been like pondering this list of titles, going through it basically, right? So I would say that the first book was different because I had the title first, and the others that I'm working on, I'd like to just, write as the inspiration strikes. For example, if there is a particular scene that I'm very excited to write and it's out of sequence, I will write it if, I feel very strongly about it. So sometimes for certain books, I think it might be helpful to have the entire story, and then you can think about the title afterwards as well. So like Heart of the Sun Warrior, for example, it took a little bit of time. Like the story was written. I do have working titles. Sometimes there's a page of 10 working titles.
So not just Untitled Book 3.
So the whole family is Untitled Book 3. But like Heart of the Sun Warrior, I had like this list of working titles. It was like slash, slash, slash.
So like as you're writing, you're like, this is nope. Like this this gets cut. Nope.
No, it's like, oh, this is good too. I'll just figure this out later.
I suppose that's what editors are for. Like that's the glory of just writing and then drafting and then just brainstorming and then having someone else sort of come in and help you kind of read it. So you wrote for us. We have an exclusive edition for Heart of the Sun Warrior, which is
I
just
can't wait to see it.
I love it. I'm
Sure.
so
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have added to our exclusive is a story, an additional story that you wrote for us. And on the our mortal archer. So Ho Yi, I hope I'm saying that right. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and revisiting that character, revisiting sort of, obviously we talk about, you talk about it's part of the Legend of the Moon Goddess, but sort of how you were able to separate that out and bring that bringing that story to the series.
So the reason why I wrote this story basically was because I was thinking about the original legend. Dora the Moon Goddess is inspired by the Legend of China, and but it's not, basically it does take the story in a different direction. And I wanted to write something that was also holds a little bit more strongly to the original legend. So there are different elements of that, and this story is basically one of them. I do really like the story, and I really wanted to imagine set in this world with these characters, how the original legend might have played out in a way. So this is actually the idea that conceived the whole story.
I love it. It is, and it kind of it's how we were obviously talking about earlier about just all the variations and I guess variations is one way to say it, or motivations of of the
Yes.
characters. So I loved when they said that you were going to write this story for us for our exclusive. It was like so now now it was perfect because it added that additional layer of motivation in for these characters, and to understand all the different parts of the legend in your world, that the world that sort of you've created, this reimagining, if you will. And
It
I am
was a
so
bit intimidating to take him on, but as in to write from his perspective. I will say, I mean, I do like writing characters, both heroes and villains, but not really, but with shades of gray to them, as in, as to make them real people, because even though whether they're heroes or villains, I think they still feel all the same things, maybe different degrees. They still are afraid. I'm sure they all have selfish motivations in a way, or they have something that they were fighting for, but things just took them down a different way. So it was very fascinating for me to just think about it from this perspective. I'm so glad you like the idea too.
I loved it. I loved it. And
Yeah.
that's interesting that you say about because I do think I mean, or I have heard people say, they prefer, or they enjoy writing villains, or they enjoy, that sort of writing that hero, or in that hero's journey. But it is, I think, when I talk to people who really, love the villains, or really love writing villains, I do often hear that I think the reason people love writing villains is because there is gray. It's nobody is sort of one dimensional, and that there's always,
Absolutely.
and there are motivations behind actions, and someone is never all good or all bad. Do you prefer, or is it writing those villains, or I guess in a way being able to sort of interpret their motivations?
I like writing both, and because as you said, no one is either wholly good or wholly bad, and I like thinking about why they were a certain way. Maybe I guess with villains there is a lot more scope to the story, because sometimes it might be from something that happened in their past, or just how their nature works, and in some ways it can be something that we relate to more than straight, like honor or valor, right? But I also like thinking about what makes a hero do these things, because I think everyone does feel afraid or nervous, and it would be I think it would be impossible for anyone just to go out and charge into battle on the front line, and without feeling these things. But maybe their motivation or what drives them is just different, or it has different strengths in certain ways, right? So I actually do enjoy writing both.
I love it. So obviously you've gained inspiration from these tales, from these myths that you sort of grew up with. But I always love to ask what your current motivations, who's currently inspiring you, and what are you reading now? Who are the stories, or what are the stories that you're loving now? authors and books that are sort of keeping you going in 2022.
Yeah, it's been quite a year.
Yeah.
Well, I've been reading a lot of art lately, which has been wonderful. I read
Yes.
something that I loved recently. It was called The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I thought it was. Have you read it?
No, I am currently no spoilers. I'm halfway through right now, and just
No,
yeah,
I really liked it. I thought it was very, very haunting. I love the characters and the way it was written as well. I read quite widely, as in I read both adult and young adult as well. I also read A Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber recently, and I mean, it's just like, for all fairy tale lovers. It to me, it was like very wonderful escapism. I was actually in a reading slump at a point in time, and it really helped me get out of it. I thought it was very lovely. I also read recently. I've been on quite a reading spell.
that's perfect. It
I
is,
read Barrow.
I mean, for here, it's getting a little bit, the weather's getting a little bit chilly, and it's that cozy
Things
season.
makes a difference.
Makes you want to, like, wearable blankets, books, tea, bubble tea, coffee, whatever your drink of choice. Again, talking about that sort of escapism, do you tend to stay in the fantasy lane? Like, is that where you, in your reading habits, or do you jump around?
I do tend to stay in fantasy land. I've always loved reading fantasy, so I always love reading fairy tales as well. So I do tend to stay in there. Um, Sometimes I'll branch over into romance, but not recently. I'm just trying to think of one right now, but not recently. I read Barrow of Winter as well by H.M. Long. It's a very wintry fantasy with battles and monsters and stuff, and with a demigod protagonist who's dealing with family issues. I thought it was very, very fun. Fantasy tends to be my thing.
It's funny. It's demigods, and I think to myself, like, in your books, like, these are mortals and mortals. There's mortals have so many problems. These gods.
I know they behave as badly as us.
That is true. Touche. They do. Sue Lynn, thank you so much for having this chat with me, for coming and chatting. It's really been wonderful. Daughter of the Moon Goddess, for those who are watching along, this gorgeous cover, and Heart of the Sun.
I love how they look together.
Again, that's what I said.
Yeah.
It's a shame to put them spined in your bookshelf. So these epic novels of the Celestial Kingdoms duology, they're out now. Untitled Book 3. Untitled Book 4.
Oh no. I'm gonna regret those.
Those are going to be coming soon, and thank you so much for giving us a little sneak peek into what we can expect. I know that I am going to be patiently waiting, maybe not so patiently waiting, for them to arrive. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it was wonderful to speak with you, and I had a really great time.
Thank you.
Probably said some things I shouldn't have, but.
Hello readers, it's time for another TBR Top Off. We're going to recommend a couple of great books to pick up when you stop in for your copy of Heart of the Sun Warrior. I'm Mark, I'm coming to you from my Barnes & Noble in Cincinnati.
And I'm Madison, coming to you from my Barnes & Noble in Indianapolis.
We've got two fantastic books to recommend today. Madison, I'm going to jump right in.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I chose a book that I have been thrusting into the hands of customers for quite a while now. And that is Beneath the Moon by Yoshi Yoshitani. This is a gorgeous book. It's essentially a collection of 70 plus descriptions of mythological characters from folklore around the world. So each story is accompanied by a beautiful illustration by the author. The characters and fables range from very familiar to not familiar at all. You've got Japan, you've got Italy, Africa, Mexico, and some of the usual fare, like you've got a Rapunzel page, but then you also have these characters who I've never even heard of, but have fantastic stories. I just really loved learning about new facets of storytelling and culture. And I love this book because you can open to any page, get a little quick nugget of delicious mythology and then move on with your day. Or you can just do like I really did and start to finish and pour over it completely, and then go back and like pop around to different pages. But either way, this is an excellent gift for curious readers. It looks wonderful on a bookshelf. It looks even better on a coffee table. So please check out Beneath the Moon by Yoshi Yoshitani. Madison, what do you have for us?
So my pick, I've read it and it's recommended by actually one of my managers, Alicia. She is an avid fan of Lynn Tan, and she's also an avid fan of this book as well, and that is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie Oh. So this is a kind of a Korean mythology retelling that we have here, and it centers around Mina, and Mina's people who believe that the sea god is cursing them, and they're doing all they can to kind of alleviate that curse. So what they do is each year they sacrifice a girl to the sea in hopes that she will become the sea god's bride, and one of them will be the legendary true bride, and the curse will end. So what happens is that Mina's brother's girlfriend, essentially, she is chosen, they believe she is the legendary true bride, but what happens is Mina kind of sacrifices herself in her place. And then she is taken to a spirit realm. So she finds herself in this spirit realm. Very like Studio Ghibli-esque imagery is what I imagined when I read it. Kind of like that type of film as I was reading. And she meets this mysterious stranger, gets herself in a ragtag team of demons, gods, and spirits. And then they go on a quest of sorts to awaken the sea god. It is such a wonderful story. I loved it. Again, if you're like a fan of like those Studio Ghibli films, a fan of retellings, I think the imagery of this book is magnificent. Oh knows what she's doing. That was The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie Oh.
Such a good pick. Such a good pick, as always. Well, that is all we have for today. Thanks so much for tuning in to Poured Over, and please make sure to give us a rating and subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can also follow us at Barnes & Noble. I'm Mark. You can follow my home store at BN Westchester.
And I'm Madison. You can follow my home store at BN River Crossing.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Happy reading. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.